Okay. Yeah, exactly. So I move that we have Mr. Webb step in as chair until the chair arrives. Aye.
Aye.
So, Mr. Kimball, if you would call the roll.
With pleasure, sir. Mr. Ankuma,
Aye.
Ms. Gill,
Aye.
Mr. Reitinger, and Mr. Webb.
Here.
Great. We have a
All right.
quorum.
We all rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And before I call for the adoption of the agenda, just to let everyone know that the chair is running a little late for the meeting, and he will step in once he arrives. So if I could have, someone move the adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so we will move on to public comment. All right. In accordance with school board bylaws 2.30, the time for each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Additional written statements may be submitted to the clerk for dissemination to the board members for the record and deposition of requests for the public. Okay, so we look to have 2 comments, and the first would be Ann Rhodes Klein. Yeah. You see the green dot?
Now is it on? All right. My name is Annie Rhodes Klein, and I live at 1005 Seton Lane. Eminent domain is when government takes private land for public use. It is not a sale. The landowner has no opportunity to refuse and no opportunity to insist on a price. If they did, it would be a sale. Eminent domain is invoked when government has a compelling public need for the land and no other options. Eminent domain is very detrimental and destabilizing to communities. Just mention the phrase and property owners start wondering whether their homes are next. How can our local government possibly argue that we have a compelling public need for the 2 or so acres of residential land at 604 South Oak and no other options for school expansion? Our government is simultaneously discussing converting 10 acres of our own school property from the high school, middle school campus for business use, arguing that we do not need it for our schools. I would very much like my local government to make decisions that are community building. This discussion of eminent domain is the opposite. I would very much like my local government to take actions for change only when they are logical, reasonable, and likely to be successful. This discussion of eminent domain is the opposite. I gave these comments to City Council yesterday also. And I would like to add tonight that eminent domain is a particularly inappropriate foundation for school expansion in a district that claims to have a zero tolerance for bullying.
Thank you. All right, and our second comment will be from Melissa Dana.
Hi, I'm Melissa Dana. I live at 314 North Lee Street. And I wanted to talk to you tonight about our school system accepting awards from for-profit commercial companies, because I know that's on a work session coming up soon. I'm of course referring to the Apple Distinguished Programs Award, the Renaissance Schools of Excellence Award, and the Digital Schools Survey Award. It is unethical and counterproductive for a public school system which is responsible for molding and shaping our children and teaching them to think independently and critically, to be advertising shamelessly for commercial companies in the manner that we do. A few months ago, I talked to Eric Wood from Apple. He's the field officer who visited our schools and recommended us for the Apple Award. I had a 2-hour conversation with him, which resulted in 4 things. Number 1, this is not an award of merit. There are no specific, rigorous, objective academic criteria that one has to meet to get this award. Number 2, this award does not benefit us, it benefits Apple. It allows them to bring others into our school system to see how we use technology, more advertising for Apple. Number 3, it does not help our graduates get into college. There are no colleges who look at our graduates as especially competitive because they come from a high school that has this award. And number 4, if we stop using Apple products, guess what happens to the award? It goes away. If nothing else tells you that this award is self-serving for Apple, then that should. Here's the thing that bothers me the most, though. The Campaign for Commercial-Free Childhood says that students are harmed when schools promote corporate profits at the expense of children's health and well-being. Marketing undermines critical thinking and derails public education's most important mission. Wow. Helping children become active, thinking participants in a democratic society. Schools can either educate students to become good citizens or train them to become passive consumers, not both. Our own Common Sense Media website says advertisers know that the earlier kids learn about a brand, the more likely they'll be to buy the product later. Getting the product in front of a target audience as much as possible strengthens a company's ability to capture consumers from the cradle to the grave. I'd like to ask you to consider, what do we have to gain from this? Nothing. What do we have to lose? An ethical standing as a public institution responsible for shaping and molding children. Please take down the giant advertising banner on the high school, remove the advertising logos from our communication and our website, and please ensure that any awards we receive come from nonprofit organizations who have nothing to gain from us and give true awards of merit. Thank you.
Are there any other public comment? If not, we'll move on and we will turn it over to the superintendent for introduction of the discussion of the fellows property.
As you know, in our CIP this year, we did have funding for land acquisition for the schools to consider acquiring the fellows property, which is right across the street from the main entrance of TJ. And what we are going to see tonight in kind of a very high-level conceptual view is what will actually fit on that property, because that's one of the questions we needed to answer before you would want to go and acquire a property. As you know, there are a lot of trees on the property. It has just, general site challenges from the average person when you look at the property. So we've invited Lukemar Construction, our architects, and Greg Lukemar is going to walk you through just some of the challenges of the property, what we believe could fit on that property, given the acreage that's there. And again, you'll see it's a 1 grade level solution. And what Lukemar has modeled for us is using kindergarten-sized classrooms simply because they're larger. They tend to be around 1,000 square feet, where if you were going to build second or maybe you wanted to have a 3rd grade there, the classrooms could actually be a little bit smaller. So square footage-wise, trying to maximize the property and looking at something that would be more of an early childhood solution so that you don't need a full-size gym and some of those components you need, for instance, to house an upper grade. Those of you that have followed the board, as we've modeled through the years, know back in 2012-13, we modeled on a piece of property and know that for a K-1-2, we would need up to 5 acres. So this was really to help us understand first of all, what can you fit on a 2-acre sort of site and what it would look like, but then this particular piece of property, what are the challenges or what are the benefits? And so I'll invite Greg Lukemeier if he's going to present. And he knows that we're on a tight timetable tonight, and so we talked about the 7:30 joint session that we have. So our goal was really just to get information in front of you because we feel like it's critical. For about 20 minutes, ask some questions, and then he is happy to come back for a longer, detailed session for us if we end up having a lot of questions. Okay, Greg?
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Hi, my name is Greg Lukemeier from the Lukemeier Partnership Architects. I wonder if I could turn the lights down a little so that these actually show up. Yeah, probably as much as you can. Just anyway, as Dr. Jones said, we were asked to evaluate the site to find out what the constraints might be and what the possibilities might be to construct a one-level grade center. The site, as you know, is bounded by Oak, Parker Avenue, and Fellows Court. Right in the center is the old house. Currently, it's surrounded by trees of various sizes and conditions, but it's basically a great big open space. You know that the kids are dropped off by buses here to get into the street, and so that's one of the major issues. There are 5 houses on Fellows Court, a couple of houses on Parker, and a couple of houses back here. And I'd like to explain a little bit what the constraints are and then illustrate 3 potential ways that you might be able to construct a property. This is Fellows Court. It's the cul-de-sac right here. The houses on this side of the street are elevated. You can see in this photograph that they go uphill a little bit, and so they overlook the site. They're elevated about 10 feet above the road, as opposed to Parker Avenue, where the houses are actually much lower than your site. And the site is about 6 feet higher right at the road, and then it climbs all the way up to Fellows. One of the things as we developed these options that we thought about were important were that we needed to retain some significant trees. We have talked to the city's arborist about some of the major trees and which ones were in good shape and which ones were not in good shape. We felt very strongly that some sort of buffer needed to be between any of the residential houses and the property, to also have the possibility of potentially opening up a lot of public space. Certainly would want to continue the bus drop-off as it is now and see if it can work in both directions, and try to be as unobtrusive as possible. So our goal was, can a school exist on this site? Here are some of the constraints of the site. The site's about 2 acres. It slopes down about 16 feet across the site here, and then it slopes down another 6 feet, so you're almost going down 20 feet. And one of the issues here is that there are a couple of major trees, which I'll talk to you about. The zoning tells us that there's a 40-foot rear yard, 25 and 30-foot setback. So the setbacks are fairly significant. There are 3 major trees, an oak tree, which is the most important tree, almost smack dab in the center of the site, a magnolia, and a holly. They've actually been numbered by the city, and there are constraints. This is, you can't touch this tree. The other 2 they would like to keep, but they're not categorized at the same category as the major oak tree. The utilities, there's a sewer easement that goes right down, so all the sewers go right through the back of the property down towards Parker. And so you can begin to see what some of the constraints are. There are utilities in both streets as well as a sewer that goes through the property there. When you look at the site, it's important probably to have landscape buffers between the houses and the site. The 3 trees are roughly here. Because of the topography of the site, there's only one place on Parker and kind of one place on Oak where you could actually drive onto the site, where you don't have a significant elevation change right at the street. So these simply begin to, for us, establish what some of the constraints are to see if we can work within them. We've developed a space needs program of about 23,400 square feet, usable square feet. If you add in corridors and mechanical space, you need about 37,000 square feet to accommodate a one-level school with associated restrooms and corridors and that sort of usage. So I'm going to illustrate 3 different concepts. This first concept's idea was, and this is an important diagram, here is the oak tree, the most important oak tree, and the requirements are that we keep so many feet for every inch in diameter of the tree away from the tree and don't build anything on it. So we're illustrating here a 2-story school, and so you're going to see a 2-story school and 2 3-story schools. The 2-story school is an L-shaped school. One of the things that's critical is that in order to keep a tree of this magnitude, or any of the major trees, we can't change the grades. Otherwise, it kills the tree root. So as the site goes down 20 feet, we've established an entry elevation at about elevation 320, which is a natural grade on South Oak. As the site slopes down, we keep the school level and add 1 level above it, but at the street level, we've added a mechanical room under here, so we've taken advantage of the slope site. So very simply, as an entrance, dining and kitchen, administration, and 2 levels of classrooms. It wraps around the court of the tree. We need to accommodate approximately 20 trees. We're suggesting you enter them down here, and the folks can simply walk up a sidewalk back to the school. So it illustrates a way of establishing and opening up some public space and to hopefully create as small a building as we can. This is a sketch of what a 2-story building on the site might look like, with Parker on the low side and Oak here, Fellows at the upper. Simply illustrates a 2-level school. And what the scale of that might be. So then we said, well, what happens if we don't use an L? Could we use less site, retain more trees, if in fact you went up 1 level and had a 3-story school? The idea of this is that the only way we can really enter the site with parking is to come from South Oak. And so we've investigated a more linear school that is parallel to Fellows, same entrance location, but what it does is enables us also to pull in parking for those 20 spaces adjacent to the school and really opens up the whole rest of the site to green space. So frankly, there is a entry level with administration, dining, mechanical, and a couple of classrooms, and then 2 additional levels of classrooms to get to the 3-story. You can barely see here, we've shown you how high the houses are with the slope going down to the road, so it gives you some idea of scale. And once again, a very quick sketch of the scale of a 3-story school, first from South Oak and then from Fellows, and then looking up the hill, what that might look like. The third is to say, well, we've tried an L, we've tried a linear option parallel to Fellows. What happens if we create a school that faces South Oak and impacts the houses on both Parker and Fellows as minimally as possible, i.e. to have the short end of the school at both ends and basically face South Oak much like TJ does. So in this case, we come in, quote, a front door, have dining and a kitchen at one end, and 2 additional levels of classrooms that you can see here, with the mechanical space that can also be below that dining, with a quick sketch of, in effect, the idea of almost 2 three-story townhouses separated by an entrance so that it would fit as well as possible in the neighborhood. So here is a drawing illustrating the three options that we studied: an L shape wrapping around the tree, a linear option that leaves the major tree, and a linear option that goes, I'll say, east-west, facing South Oak. So there are two three-story schemes and a one-story scheme. So as I said, part of the goal here was to say how much of the open space can we keep, and that's dependent on the height of the school, quite frankly. How do we keep the major vegetation that's going to be required by the city, and how to make a school that's going to work well for the students and also be as comfortable on site as possible. So that's kind of a race through concept of some of the possibilities that you might have. There may be others, and there probably are some things that would need to be adjusted, but they all work in terms of the topography and the way in which the school works and the size of the classrooms and the number of parking spaces. So to a certain extent, they begin to look like somewhat of a park, depending upon how much landscaping you can leave, and try to separate any kind of structure with a significant amount of landscaping. And as you've seen, there's anywhere from 25 to 30 feet of setback. So even if some of the lesser trees need to be taken down, we would certainly recommend that you enhance the site with additional landscaping. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, or if you'd like more information, be more than happy to go through it.
Thank you very much. Are there questions? Mr. Ankuma?
Looking at all of this, it appears to be in isolation, but was there any thought given to how it connects to the school across the street?
Yes, and in all cases, well, you begin to see some sort of a plaza, which is not insignificant, that would then come and cross at one of the two intersections, realizing that the buses drop the children off on South Oak, and they could either go to TJ or directly into any one of the schools. So we thought that it was important to at least orient, I'll call it the front door, towards South Oak so that there is some possibility of a good connection.
Okay.
Ms. Gale?
Where is the recreational playground space located? And
I think in all cases, we would be identifying a part of the site, whether it's, in the case with the three-story option here, we have a fairly significant space that could be a playground, whereas with the L shape wrapping around the tree, it becomes a little bit more difficult. And that, to be quite honest with you, is one of the goals of an investigation. Rather than trying to illustrate a final design solution, we're really trying to investigate different options on the site to test them. And some work better than others. I'll be more than honest with you about that. So I think that's part of your evaluation as to how well it works and how well it doesn't work.
Ms. Hoare? Okay. Mr. Reiniger, any questions?
Just a quick question. I know you went through a number of different constraints. I'm just thinking through all of the different scenarios we might have to plan around depending on what happens in unrelated events. Did you look at all about what additional possibilities would open up if South Oak Street were not made a through street?
Yes, a little bit. We did talk about that, keeping in mind, I guess, that if in fact it was not a through street and Fellows was sort of the end coming in this direction, and of course Parker doesn't need necessarily, and we could capture some open space. Part of the issue was, where do the buses go? Because if in fact the buses stay here, you might develop this as more of hardscape, but it still needs a significant amount of space just to go through the busing operation. If there was another location for buses, that might be a different answer, though. So that was the constraint. How do we deal with buses?
Any other questions? I just had one quick one, because I know with option B, you discussed parking.
Yes.
Did you look at parking both the other option A and C sites as well?
Well, we've illustrated parking at the lower level, if you will, in the two-story. We've located parking right here on the three-story with an entrance right here so that it could also feed into the schools at almost the exact level. And then we went back again to the rear parking simply because there's a limited amount of site area and width toward the front of the site. So the only way we could really get parking up closer to Oak was really to turn the building in a linear fashion parallel to Fellows. We really also tried very hard not to bring cars in through Fellows, thinking that because there's also some traffic, more traffic on Parker, that coming into a smaller parking lot may not be as impactful, quite frankly, as the cars coming down the cul-de-sac.
Ms. Ward?
Yeah, thank you. So with respect to building a plaza and blocking off Oak Street, is there any way the buses could either come up Parker and then just go up, turn up Oak, go north on Oak Street?
From
Is there
this
anything
direction?
restraining that from
To
happening?
be quite honest with you, we did not study that. There's plenty of space for that to happen, but we did not interact with your transportation folks to talk about
Okay,
where the buses come from at this point.
I guess it's a little premature, but I just wanted to know if you considered that, because I really like the idea of having that all blocked off so there's a free flow and students are safe crossing back and forth as well as teachers.
I think there's definitely a possibility. It would need to be developed so that it didn't look like an abandoned street, obviously, but to really be a place that perhaps could even be a hard play for the students in the
Exactly.
one-level school or the neighborhood.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Dr. Jones?
Yeah, just because it does predate the school board. The first time this was modeled was back in 2009, 2010, and at that time, it was looking expanding in front of TJ and actually closing Oak and acquiring this property at some point in the future, maybe for possible fields or play space. We have, and when the city looked at the property, determined that it would be very difficult to turn into any sort of play space like a park. The other thing about the street, that we know right now is all the utilities run under that area of the street. So it's a very expensive construction option for us if you wanted to really tear up the street. We did look at, in 2012, looking at where the trailers exist now, and could you build a wing on, for instance, that side of the building that emulates what we did in 2012-13. But if you do that, then you're still lacking, unless you were going to build exactly the same size as what they're talking about tonight. It almost has to be a school within a school concept because you don't have enough gym, cafeteria in those places. So in the different models since 2009, all of those different options have been looked at. And the biggest question, I think, that we had was, first of all, will a one grade level even fit on here with all these trees and the change in the grades? So that was actually nice to know that you have an option. We weren't really sure we had an option until we did this modeling.
I tried to show you TJ in relationship, but it's still too bright. You probably can't see this, but you can see the scale of TJ versus what we recently showed you.
Anything else? All right. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
I'm sure we potentially will be calling on you again. All right, so next we'll be going into close. And if someone could read us into close.
can do it. Pursuant to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, I move that the board convene a closed meeting for the following purpose: to discuss or consider the identified subject matter, personnel under Section 2.2-3711A1, in particular, staff appointments, staff reassignments, staff resignations, staff retirement, staff performance, EPED assignments, and advisory committee appointments and resignation, and student matters under Section 2.2-3711A2, in particular, a non-resident tuition student, and legal matters under Section 2.2-3711A7, in particular, consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by the public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, in particular, the Mount Daniel Project.
Thank you, Ms. Gill. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Reinger. Mr. Kimball?
Yes. Mr. Ankuma?
Aye.
Ms. Gill?
Aye.
Mr. Reitinger?
Yes.
Ms. Ward? Mr. Webb?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, we shall be back shortly. Can someone move us into open?
Certified closed meeting. Mr. Chair, whereas the Falls Church Public School Board has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3711 subsection B of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the school board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, now therefore be it resolved that the Falls Church Public School Board hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, 1, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirement by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification applies, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Don't we need to
I can say, did we
reconvene?
just need, I was just going to say, you jumped a little bit ahead, but just to open.
Point of
just to-
order,
My apologies.
could we suspend that motion for a second?
Yeah,
I move we reconvene in an open meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now, Mr. Nkuma's motion.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Reidinger. No.
Mr. Ankuma? Ms. Gill?
Aye.
Mr. Reitinger?
Yes.
Ms. Ward? Mr. Webb?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to move the consent agenda. Any opposed? No. Well, okay. Move the consent agenda, and we will move on to this discussion of the teacher evaluation. Dr. Jones.
As many of you know, every summer, all of our admin team comes together and we kind of work on our own professional development. And we work on our evaluation system every summer because it's been new for the last 4 years. And as we were working on it this year, we have a lot of administrators in new positions, either new leadership with greater responsibility or new administrators. And we all recognize that it takes time to learn the tool and the instrument and how to do everything online. And as we were processing it as an admin team, they pretty much unanimously felt that actually we must by law, first of all, let me say, evaluate every teacher every year. That is not an option to not evaluate every teacher. What we do have an option of is a formal evaluation, and we can have 2 years of informal and then do a formal again. For us, because we have done goal setting along with our annual evaluation, we want to take our goal setting for those teachers who would be in their second or third year that are career teachers with us and actually use that as our interim evaluation, which is for that year 2 and year 3. And what we're asking the school board for tonight is really your approval that you support that, because in our work plan, we do talk about formal evaluation, and we've always talked about formal evaluation every single year. And since our policy says formal evaluation, I believe as well, we just feel like we need board approval to make this change because it is a little different for us. But again, we have, in this evaluation, the other thing that we want to do, and we had planned to do this, is to reconvene the teacher committee. It will be a different committee because we've had changes of staff. So in 2011-12, 2012-13, we had a large committee from the entire school division that actually put this rubric together, and it's gone through different iterations. It actually was a lot more robust probably 2 or 3 years ago. And we want to reconvene the teachers and ask them, and starting in the fall, okay, what do we want this to look like? We must have 7 standards. That's Virginia law as well. I mean, that's Virginia code. So under each one of those standards right now, we don't have that many indicators. We have 3 for Standard 1. We have 4 indicators, which means 4, which is not a lot for Standard 2. We have 6 for Standard 3. 3 indicators for Standard 4. We have 5 that we look for in Standard 5, 6 in Standard 6, and 4 in Standard 7. So I don't want you to think that our evaluation system is this huge, big, long document. I'm not sure that our teachers will bring us anything back that will be hugely different. We don't know. Because one of the reasons we have those 3, 4, 5 indicators under each standard is they did not want their principals just choosing whether you're exemplary or proficient and not being able to tell them why. So the indicators are actually those items underneath each indicator, those 3 to 5 kind of things that help them understand, well, here's where I really think you could grow. So, but we want our teachers to look at, are these the right indicators? You know, is this what we still want? And we would like to reconvene that in the fall. So that's what we're asking the school board tonight, is that you would support what the principals are asking for what they think actually is going to be really positive for them, and they think they're going to be able to be out in classrooms more, which they're also looking forward to doing as well.
All right, thank you, Dr. Jones. Mr. Wright, I see you're ready to go there.
Sure. I was actually trying to turn it off, but thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support the change. It seems to me, and from everything I've heard from teachers in the community, that the annual formal evaluation system is a bit overkill and is taking more time from teachers and administrators than is strictly necessary based on experience. So it seems to me like this is a very good step forward. And I very much like the idea of convening a teacher committee with administrators to work through what the process ought to look like. A couple of things I'd suggest. I'd be very interested in having PIAC have a formal role in that process. I don't know how that's constituted, but to make sure that you have a broader view of all of the teachers about what the evaluation process ought to look like. And I certainly would be very interested in hearing about additional changes in the evaluation system that might be appropriate. I take what you said at face value, Superintendent, but I have heard a number of teachers complain about the 20-page evaluation process, so I think that ought to be looked at. And I also would be interested in hearing about the requirement that every administrator visit every classroom every week. Because I have heard something about that requiring, that cadence requires administrators to walk through classrooms too quickly, and it adversely affects the quality of the feedback they're able to give teachers. So that's not my area of expertise at all, but those are some of the subjects I'd like to hear. I certainly am very supportive of the idea that you've put forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Just real quick for myself, it was and the question about the weekly walkthrough of the administrators as well, just to hear a little bit more about the purpose of that and seeing if there's a way to possibly adjust it. But
You want me to answer?
oh, if you
Sure.
okay.
I mean, as far as principals and assistant principals walking through the classrooms, I think the teachers do enjoy that, because when you're doing your formal evaluation, if you've had the principal or assistant principal in your classroom, you know that they know about your teaching, and it's just not a one-time snapshot of that particular day. So, with going to this proposed policy change, I think will allow principals to be able to spend more than 2 or 3 minutes in a classroom. And if, one of the things when we met during the summer, we talked about if there's an area that we want a teacher to focus on, that doesn't mean you can't spend more time with them just because we're not evaluating them formally that year. That gives you more opportunities to visit the classrooms. And when we met with the committee 4 years ago, they liked the idea of having administrators come in their classroom on a regular basis so that you really understood their practice, and it wasn't just kind of fly in and then rate me as exemplary or proficient. So it is time consuming, but I think it is beneficial to all parties.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Margaret. Well, and I just want to add, when we moved to this, because we were a system where we weren't really out in classrooms at all, and you can't read anything in 21st century that doesn't say the role of the principal has changed, and to be an instructional leader, you have to be out in classrooms. I mean, it's really important to do that and to know what's going on in your building. And in order to support our principals, and our principals recognize this, that's one reason we put in the special education administrators, and we have them in our 3 out of our 4 buildings. The only reason we don't have it in the 4th building is our 4th building's tiny, tiny. We don't have very many teachers. I mean, the most we've had is, I think, 18 or 19, and we have an assistant principal there, so it's very, very manageable, and that's Mount Daniel. The other 3 buildings have special education administrators. That is an enormous load that most principals and assistant principals have in other buildings. At our high school, we went one step farther, and we have maintained having a dean. We have people that are helping with student activities. Those are not falling on our assistant principals either. And, you know, we talk a lot in the summer about allowing our principals to be instructional leaders, and in Falls Church, it's really, I mean, I think that's one reason we've also been able to have a couple of our hires this summer, because they crave that. They really, that's what they want to do. So I just share that there's a reason for that, and it's very much supported in the literature.
And just one last thing I have to say, since we've gone to a more visits to the classroom, I've received fewer follow-up write-ups from teachers saying, I don't agree with my evaluation. I've not received very many of those in the last 3 or 4 years, just because there is time and conversations through this evaluation process. So teachers feel like they've had that opportunity to talk to principals, and they've seen their practice enough that we're not getting those follow-up letters that say, I disagree with whatever my rating is.
Ms. Ward?
Well, I just want to reiterate what Lisa was saying. It's difficult at best to just be observed once, maybe twice a year. If you're having a bad day, or, you know, just your kids are off, it's better to, you know, have more frequent observations, because you get a better picture of what actually is going on in that room than stopping in just once a year. So I like that. I like the frequent visits.
Any other questions? And for me, it was just not necessarily not having the visits and doing them on a somewhat regular basis, but from what I guess I'm understanding, it was a week. Is it a weekly? And that was more of that potential of shift there, but definitely not limiting them to a couple times during the academic year.
And it's a goal. It doesn't mean that it always happens 100%. I mean, it's just a goal, and it kind of keeps it in the forefront of your mind as an administrator that I do need to get out into the classroom, because we all know, and whether it's education or another job, things do enter in our day that stop us from doing what we had planned to do that day. So this kind of is set as a goal, and helps to keep it in the forefront of their mind throughout the year. And I think the principals and assistant principals do find that it is beneficial, you know, but I know that all of them don't make 100% every week, and that's fine.
All right, thank you. If there are no other questions, can we have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the school board waive the annual requirement for all tenured staff to be formally evaluated during the 2016-2017 school year as stated in policy 8.33 and school board priority 2.0. As presented in the document that was provided to us from the Virginia Code, an interim evaluation will be conducted through the annual goal setting as appropriate for tenured staff.
Thank you, Mr. Reitinger. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Gill. Thank you. Mr. Kimball?
Good. Mr. Ankuma?
Aye.
Ms. Gill?
Aye.
Mr. Reitinger? Yes. Ms. Ward? Mr. Webb?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you very much. All right, 7.02, the Mount Daniel update.
Yeah, and I'll be very quick because it really hasn't changed since we've done our last update. We are continuing to work with Fairfax County staff, with Commissioner Allfelder, and any other questions that commissioners in Fairfax Planning Commission would have. And that's really just to answer any of those questions that came up at the last hearing. And that's where we are as of today, and we will be back in front of them on September the 14th.
Any questions? And next will be future agenda items. Anyone have anything they'd like to add to our hopefully shortening list of things that we want to have discussions about?
Just, I know we're short.
Mr. Reitinger.
I know we're behind, and so I'm going to be very brief. The Falls Church News Press last week ran and guest commentary from the editors of the LASSO, suggesting that we change the policy requiring prior review by administrators before school publications go out. I think there are equities on both sides of that concern, and in particular, you need to make sure that these school papers don't put any particular student in a bad situation. But that said, I would like to take a look at that, and I think it would be an interesting examination, and I think there could be some things that we could do, like, ask the journalism class to draft us a proposed policy, and we could take it or leave it, or it could be just an input from the community. But I think there are some interesting values we can try to model here that I'd like to try. And even if we don't change the policy, it'd be a useful exercise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reitinger. Anyone else? Ms. Ward?
I just wanted to agree with Phil. That's a fabulous idea. I like the idea of having the journalism class take this on as a project, and it's a great learning experience for the students. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
I just have a couple of things tonight. First of all, I'm checking the time, I know I gotta hurry. Kudos to Lisa. She was able to maintain at least a one-year extension on our UVA tuition. That was a big, we've been working on that for months, and that's a big deal to our staff because we thought we'd lost $30,000. It's only for 1 year, but for those people in grad school, it makes a big difference. Just updating on enrollment kind of pressures, we had 2 positions that were available. We've used one for 5th grade to keep from going over. The other one was added to pre-K today, so we're out of those 2 positions. We are watching enrollment pressures on kindergarten, 1st and 2nd, and so I may be coming back to the school board in the next week or so if the numbers continue to climb at all, to use the contingency. And that'll be a big discussion for the school board because we also have pressures with things like our MEH sewage. As you know, we've been fighting to try to get insurance to pay for that. They've denied the claim. So that's at least, we think, going to be $60,000. And again, because our contingency is not large this year, it's very early to not have it. We also are, just an update, HVAC at TJ is progressing well. The HVAC for the George Mason Auditorium will be put in after the year starts, but we will get that repaired, so we're happy about that. And the last thing just is that our special education advisory committee, as you know, doesn't have a chair right now, but Liz Germer did move forward, and October the 3rd has booked their training session so that the same gentleman from the state can come back and really get them started off on the right foot with the new committee. So she'll be messaging them tomorrow, just so that everybody is prepared for their first meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the superintendent? All right, we'll move on to board and student liaison comments. And we'll start with Ms. Ward and see if she has any.
No, I have nothing tonight.
Mr. Ankuma,
Nothing to report.
Mr. Reitinger, and Ms. Gill.
Nothing.
All right, that's good. I just have one request for Hunter. If Dr. Jones could be in on this as well, do we have any, and you don't have to do it tonight, but if we have a number of students who are potentially coming out of the new Harris Theater building, if we at that point, no, but you don't have to answer right now, you can just let me know later.
I know Dr. Jones is on top of that issue.
I'm keeping up with that every day, but right now they go into InfoSnap first. We have to pull them out of the pre-enrollment and then put them into Power School. So in about another week we'll know. It was staying low, which was good, but we just don't know how many have pre-enrolled. But I watch that every day.
All right. And we have several minutes that need to be approved. If I can motion to approve the minutes for June 7th, or do we have to do them individually? Or can we June 7th, 14th, July 11th, and July 12th?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the school board approve the minutes of June 7th, June 14th, July 11th, and July 12th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Nkuma. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any materials for review for meetings? And I guess we will adjourn to the joint meeting downstairs with the City Council. Thank you all very much.
Absolutely.